Hey everyone, and welcome. Today I want to talk to you guys about a bit of an introductory level topic, but maybe something that you guys will find interesting, which is how to get started playing live cash mix games. Obviously, when you are getting into playing mixed games and you're playing tournaments, it's quite a simple situation, right? You know the buy-in of the tournament, the exact structure, the exact games that are going to be in the mix. All of this stuff is posted ahead of time and you know exactly what you're signing up for. Cash games can be a very different animal because obviously every individual cash game in a poker room is probably a different mix. The stakes are not necessarily going to be exactly what you want, and there's not going to be that many different games going, so you just kind of have to see what there is. I'm going to be talking about my own experience playing live mix in the United States, primarily in the West Coast for 15 to 20 years. Everybody, throughout the world, your poker rooms might be a little bit different, but my experience is that all poker rooms are sort of set up at least in this somewhat similar manner, and professional poker players and poker players the world over are also somewhat similar. So hopefully this is helpful to you, even if your situation is a little bit different. So if you're going to start playing in a live cash mix game and you show up to the poker room, the first thing I would suggest to you is it highly depends on what stakes you're going to be playing in terms of what advice I would give you. If you are playing small stakes, which is going to be the most likely if you're just learning and you're just starting out, then when you show up, you probably want to get your information from the floor man, the floor person that's working in the poker room in that area. The reason for this is because the players at the table are not necessarily going to be that knowledgeable themselves. They may not be that thoughtful about what your questions might be as a new player, and they just may not be that helpful overall. So hopefully the floor person knows the answers to your basic questions. They will be able to tell you what the stakes are, what games are running in the mix, what the typical buy-in amount is that people are usually using. Although I would say that floor people, since they're not actually playing, may not necessarily get this to the right extent. They may just tell you the minimum buy-in that's posted for the game. But maybe take a look at the stacks of the players at the table to get a sense of what people are typically playing with in that game. But you should be able to get some good, solid information from the floor person and ask all of your questions. Don't be afraid to ask about something that maybe you don't know. And then if you are playing in a higher stakes game, or if you're wanting to start out playing mid high stakes, my advice for you would be a little bit different. I'm kind of thinking about the stakes where you'll start to find professional poker players in the game. The reason for this is because they are the ones that are going to be the most knowledgeable. They are going to be the ones that you want to ask your questions to. I have played a lot of live mix games over the years, and I can tell you that the floor people do not always know exactly what's actually happening in the game. They may think that they know, but they probably would be surprised to find out that we're sometimes doing things a little bit differently than they expect. And the professional poker players at the table are going to be the ones that are going to really know what's going on in the game, and they are going to be helpful to you because they are going to want you to join the game, right? I mean, you're a new player showing up to a game that you probably don't know very well. Any high level player is going to assume that you are going to be a bad player, that you're going to make mistakes and lose money, and of course, they're going to welcome this into their game. So I know that you are hoping to avoid this by studying away from the table, watching my channel, learning the games, but I'm just giving you the perspective of a player sitting at the table, seeing a new player walk up to the table with questions. They are going to be very helpful to you with regards to any rules questions. I have never in my 20 years of playing live poker seen a professional player at the table try to mislead a new player about the basic rules to the game. Everybody wants you to have a fun time and to lose money. And in order to do that, you have to at least feel like you have a fair game and obviously make sure that you're comfortable with all the games that are being played and get your questions answered so that you will be enjoying the game and potentially come back and play again. So I would talk to the players at the table. It can be a little bit uncomfortable, but they're the ones that are going to have the right information. And some things that you want to know from either the floor person or the players at the table would be, what are the games in the mix, right? This is the most obvious place to start. Is it a mix of a few games? Is it a mix of 20 games? Obviously, some of those are going to be more intimidating than others, but get a sense of what the mix is and what games are in the mix. Also, make sure you understand the structures of the games. If you don't know a game that well, make sure you understand, is this a draw game? Is this a stud game? Is this a flop game? As many clarifying questions as you need to answer about the structure of the game, definitely make sure you get those answered. Make sure you understand if there's big bet games in the mix, if there's no limit or pot limit games, and if so, is there a cap on the game? Because that might affect the amount of money that you want to buy in for. Once you buy in, you can't take money off the table. So if you're playing in a game with big bet games, it's possible that you want to buy in more shallow so that you have like easier decisions. this is part of the thing that you should be asking, especially these days. There are a lot more big bet games in the mix than we used to play. Typically, they are played with a cap, though, so you don't really have to worry too much, and usually you need to have a cap in front of you in the game. So I would not be too worried about that, but you want to clarify these things and make sure you understand them before you start, buying in deep stacked. Also, obviously, make sure you understand the structure of the game so you can start thinking about what the right strategy might be in your mind. Is there an ante? How large is the ante? How shallow is the game? How deep is the game? These are all the things you want to ask. And then finally, you want to understand when you're playing a round of a game in a mix. Are you playing round by round, what we sometimes call San Diego, or are you waiting for the big blind and then posting and then you can quit whenever you want? And obviously, the most plus EV way to do this would be to play up until the big blind before you want to leave and then quit right before the big blind. There are pros and cons to both, but in higher stakes games, we typically play round by round, or what we call San Diego, because that's where this idea was invented. The reason for this is so that everyone pays the same amount of blinds and antes, because sometimes different games in the mix have different structures, and now it's fair for everybody, right? If you're able to post in a smaller blind game and then take free hands in a bigger blind or an ante game, that wouldn't be fair for everyone. So typically in a round by round game, you have to agree before the round starts whether or not you are going to play the entire orbit. The downside to this can be that even if you play one or two hands in that orbit from whatever position, you are obligated to then take the blinds and complete the orbit. And this can be a problem every now and then where somebody runs out of money in the middle of an orbit and we have to figure out the best solution to this problem. But typically in higher stakes games, everybody knows everybody and we have the expectation of integrity in these situations, and it's usually not too big of a problem. Every once in a while it is. The upside of making sure that everybody gets the same blinds and antes, and everyone plays the same number of hands in an orbit, everyone gets each position at the table. These are the reasons to do it. The negative would be what I stated about, every now and then there being a problem when somebody doesn't want to rebuy and they haven't paid their blinds yet in the middle of the orbit. But make sure you understand when you can come and when you can go, because obviously that would be fair for everyone and also to be fair to yourself. And then finally, make sure you're asking any rules questions, right? So you want to clarify any rules for any games that you're not super familiar with. If you have a hesitation about what hand beats what, or when there's a drawing decision, or just really anything, you should always feel free to speak up about these rules questions, even in the middle of a hand. There is no way that somebody is going to fail to answer as accurately as they can about the rules of a game. You do want to clarify them, even mid-hand. Of course, it's going to give away a little bit of information about the hand that you're holding. That can be a bit of a negative in the hand, but you'd much rather find out in the middle of the hand and make sure you understand the rules and what's going to win at showdown before you get to the end and find out the hard way. So don't be embarrassed. Definitely make sure to ask. What I would avoid doing is to ask strategy questions, either when you join the table or certainly during hands, right? One, the weaker players at the table aren't going to know good strategy anyway, and they're going to give you misleading information. They may not be intending to, but they're probably not going to be giving you very helpful information, so you might just learn bad quality information. And the good players at the table are just going to give you generic, not very useful information either. So you want to do your strategy studying away from the table. Learn the games by learning the basic structures and the rules of the game at the table. And if you don't understand the game well enough to play it, maybe even ask the other players at the table if they would mind if you skip that round or sit out that orbit. I highly doubt someone's going to mind to let a new player skip certain games when they don't really even know the game or they've never seen it before. Watch the game for a round, see if you understand it, and maybe you jump back in. And then do your studying away from the table, right? Your strategy work should be here, watching my channel, watching training content, watching, and reading books, learning about the games away from the table. When you're at the table, just make sure you clarify any rules questions. And then finally, if you get to showdown in a hand and you're not absolutely certain whether you've won or lost, or particularly whether you've lost, then show your cards, guys. There's no shame in showing a losing hand, especially when you're a new player. You're going to have an image as someone who's inexperienced anyway. This is not going to hurt you, particularly if you're actually a little bit more experienced at the games from maybe studying away from the table or from playing online than you appear to be. It's never going to hurt you to look like a newer player. Show your cards. The best hand is going to be awarded the pot. Nobody is going to cheat you out of a pot that's rightfully yours, but you have to show your hands, right? If you think you know the game, I can't tell you how many times in my years I have misread my own hand. It is definitely something that happens to even the best players, but nevertheless, it can be easily avoided by just showing your cards at showdown, not being ashamed to show your hand as if whether you played the hand poorly or well, it will help you. And this would be the number one tip I would give you is don't throw away part of a pot because you didn't understand something because you haven't played the game enough to be totally experienced with it. There is never any shame in showing your cards. So that's all I can think of for basic advice. I would love to dive more into these topics if you guys have specific questions or anything that like may not be obvious to you that maybe just because I've played so much live mixed games that for me becomes second nature. So ask me any questions in the comments and I'll be happy to make more content on these sort of subjects and give you guys some information that can be helpful from the perspective of a professional player at the table. And hopefully, you find these games welcoming, that you enjoy it if you do decide to go and try to play a live mixed game and you haven't done that too much before. And hopefully this is helpful to you. So let me know what questions you have and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.